For the first time since the filing of the COCs, 5 presidential aspirants joined the press in an important forum to talk about their plans for the country.
Kinakailangan natin ng bagong politika. Politika ng masa. Politika ng mamayan. Hindi ng iilan.
I can get things done. Kaya ko po yung trabaho at may resulta at may prueba.
Ito ang aking panata sa bayan. Towards the end of my term as President, there should be no doubt in the mind of every Filipino that we are better off than when we started. That our people trust their government much better than ever before.
Kung paano ako nangarap para maiahon sa kahirapan ang aking pamilya, ang aking mga relatives, ganun din po ang aking pangarap na maiahon sa kahirapan ang buong sambayan ng Pilipino na magbigay ng magandang kinabukasan sa ating mga kababayan.
Ang inaalok kong uri ng pamamahala, isang gobyernong tapat, mahusay, masipag, at laging maaasahan. Hindi ka lolokohin, hindi ka nanakawan, hindi ka iiwan o pababayaan.
Maasa ang chairman ng MVP Group of Companies na si Manny Pangilinan na pagtutuunan din ng pansin ng mga presidential aspirant ang malaking ambag sa ating ekonomiya ng industriya ng pagmimina.
Taon-taon, bilyong-bilyong piso ang naipapasok ng industriya ng pagmimina sa bansa.
You have to understand what benefits mining provides to our people, and yet we do know, all of us know, that the products of mines touch everyday life. I mean, your cell phones, your fuel, your power, they're all a product of mining, di ba?
The official campaign season starts next week, but presidential hopefuls are now beginning to lay down their platforms and to answer questions about their stance on many issues. As the elections heat up, so does the temperature as summer sets in. What are some key concerns on consumer utilities such as water, electricity, roads, and even mining? We discussed in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay, joining us from the newsroom in Manila of the Philippine Star, Ami Pamintuan. And here in the studio with me, Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, happy Friday.
Happy weekend.
Happy weekend.
We're of course having this session after the big KBP Presidential Forum na naganap kanina. Ed, give us the 1-minute version of ano nangyari.
Wala
1-minute version, tanong mo pa lang yun.
Oo, kasi kung 2 minutes sa'yo yun.
No, but ikaw, Ami, napanood mo ba? How would you recap it?
It's very good, ha? Very informative. Saka, syempre, karamihan sa salita kasi I hope marami nakinig. Total, Tagalog naman yung salita. Maraming mas yung reach, no? Pang radyo yun eh. Kaya sayang na merong one candidate na maybe later baka sumama na siya, no?
Pangalanan mo na. That was Bongbong Marcos, of course, as everybody knows by now. That was no secret. In fact, they announced it yesterday pa na hindi makadalo due to scheduling conflicts, they said.
Pero at least ang dami yung nakuha, ang dami na-cover na issue, kaya maganda. I actually enjoyed it 3 hours.
And we try to zoom into specifics eh. At least we tried to. Kasi usually kasi you get motherhood statements eh. But we'd like to go beyond that.
Yeah.
At least we tried to.
Kanina nga may nag-interview sa akin and I was saying, tinatanong ko ano yung takeaway. At sabi ka, ang takeaway dito is even 3 hours is bitin na bitin, di ba? I mean, kita mo naman. We actually also have to apologize to the candidates because marating napuputol, even us. It's hard to get that timing. It's very hard. But the point, therefore, is mahaba yung conversation. Everybody should keep following every conversation they can get all the way until May. Diba?
May 3 buwan pa naman. So may pagkakataon pa.
And so, anyway.
Makaka-interview naman tayo ng mga tao that can expound on other issues na hindi masyadong napag-usapan.
That's right. And speaking of which, as we said this morning, we had the first ever media-pooled presidential forum. But before we discuss our takeaways further from the candidates, We'll first take up utilities, transportation, sports, even mining, business, private sector in general. Speaking of conversations to be had, we begin tonight with MVP Group of Companies Chairman, Mr. Manny V. Pangilinan. Good evening, sir. Welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good
Good
evening, sir.
evening, Ami, Ed, and Robbie.
Napa.
Unang-una, hindi ako tumatakbong presidente, okay? So be kind with me.
Walang timer. No, si Ed lang po, si Ed yung mainit daw magtanong eh. Apa. No, but sir, if you don't mind, dami kong binanggit na industriya. I actually want to start with telco. As you know, yesterday the bicameral version of the Public Service Act was passed. Telcos is there. This is to encourage foreign investment also. How do you take this bicameral version if you've seen it, and ultimately what is the impact not just for your company but for the industry and for Philippine society in general?
I would say it's a big step forward. In a way, it's a courageous step, allowing foreign ownership of certain key businesses, like telcos, expressways, and a number of them. So that's good. The telco business is a beast of a consumer of capital to build, especially if you're new, build networks and technology changes that are affecting the spending of telcos. So I think it's a big step forward, and I do hope that we can continue to relax the constraints on this economy, to bring the funds in. Something I think that are very vital when the new president sits.
Yeah. Speaking of constraints, so that's one barrier down. But again, in telco in particular, that's still subject to franchise. No? That's still subject to. We are still not one of the few, if not the only country now where a telco franchise still has to pass through congressional. How far away in the horizon is that conversation?
You mean the franchise?
Whether or not, now that we've heard a significant on the Public Service Act, the next question might be, do we do away with franchising altogether, having to go through Congress for that?
I don't think we should do away with it completely, whether by way of franchising or some form of regulatory regime, because these are still very important businesses for the country. So some form of regulation must still be maintained to ensure that there is some order to the business. So I don't see it being totally unfettered, because public interest is very much in the business. As I said, it's imbued with public interest. So there must be some form of regulation. For example, on tollways, tariff adjustments are approved by government. So some form of approval process that I think is still needed.
Mr. Pangilinan, pagsasamahin ko na yung pinanggalingan natin kanina, the presidential interviews. Mining is not being thoroughly discussed dito sa campaign. What do you want to hear from the candidates with regard to mining?
Well, from what I could gather from them, I didn't watch the KBP event this morning, but because I was in media. But from what I could read from media, most of them, all of them, are showing a sort of a liberal view of mining. So that's good news. And if that follows through in terms of actual policy and the view of the new government towards mining, I think it would be a great development for the industry. And I do hope that happens. Whether that will eventuate on June 30th onwards, I don't know. Something happens always.
Yes, well, something happens. Well, the persistent criticism is the environmental impact. And right now, yung issue ay yung mga problema sa Davao provinces ng certain mining companies, polluting certain rivers. How do you address those concerns?
Well, certainly better regulation of the mining companies, including small miners. No? And in that regard, the structure of the regulatory regime has got to be amended, no? Because under the DNR secretary are two important agencies below him. One is the Environmental Management Bureau. Who's supposed to safeguard the environmental concerns, not only of mining, but of other businesses. Other businesses also impact the environment in some shape or form, but also the MGB, the Mines and Geosciences Bureau as well. So you've got under the secretary two agencies whose functions are, if you may, self-contradictory, right? I have to safeguard the environment and I have to promote mining. So in the States, the Environmental Protection Agency is separate from the mining regulator. So that there's still check and balance, but clearly one agency is in charge of promoting, in their case, mining, which is a very big industry in the States, and the other is to protect the environment. And we have to ensure that our regulator is also well-funded, better educated, and if the mining industry has to support that, to fund the operations of a regulator, so be it. I think we should support that, because the more informed our regulators are, I think the better it is for the mining industry. Then better safeguards are enforced and adopted, no? And that should be welcomed by the industry as a whole.
Sir, are you saying, sir, that we should spin off either the EMB or the MGB into a separate agency outside of the DENR? Having these two agencies under one roof may be contradictory?
Yeah, because you're put in that very tough position, isn't it? And typically somebody in that position will have to be populist, di ba?
Yeah.
Kanya tayo na dito sa sitwasyon na ganito, di ba? And nobody picks up the cudgels for the business itself, the business of mining.
Tapos, sir, in late December of last year, there was some movement dun sa mining industry kasi I understand the DNR lifted the ban on open pit mining that has been there since 2017. I'm wondering, moving forward, what do we foresee in the mining industry with the lifting of that ban, and what kind of movements are in the works?
Alam mo, Ed, hindi ko alam kung talagang na-lift na ba talaga yun.
Yeah.
Kasi, pinag-uusapan nyo inside Philex Mining, and I'm the one that's been prodding the senior manager of Philex. Why don't we have a new project in Silangan, no? Gold and copper mine in northern Surigao del Norte. And una sabi nila, the first question is that in the wake of, ahead of us is a new government. Will this new government maintain, indeed, that policy of open pit? We don't know.
Yeah.
There is a risk that they might not. And we will lose a lot of time if we revert to, originally, Silangan was an open pit. If we revert to our old approach of open pit. We're far ahead of sub-level cave mining, underground mining for Silangan, which is least disturbing of the environment. So for those two reasons, it will cost us some more to go back to open pit. So we've decided to proceed with underground mining for Silangan. No? So hindi namin alam eh. Even now, we don't know whether that will actually get approved if we were to make an application. So wag na lang eh, because we don't want that headache of, di ba, of uncertainty ahead of us. Yeah.
So let's talk about the other side of that, as you said, that other side of the reality. We've been talking largely about policymakers, the business sector, but also policymakers. We're talking about the policy level, but on the level of the public and public perception of mining. How do you begin to address that, given that in all reality, communities have had trauma in the past? At the same time, these are way back in the past in many instances. People are still referring to Marcapor hanggang ngayon. But what's there to do from the mining industry's perspective in terms of bridging that gap, not just on the policy level, but between the industry and the public at large?
Well, to a degree, maybe a large degree, mining has been at fault itself. There have been unfortunate events. You mentioned Mark Copper, that's one of them, a big pollution event, as I understand it, in their case. And there are probably instances, and and pictures have been shown about the earth being scarred, pollutants being thrown to rivers or even to the oceans. So it's so easy to demonize mining in that respect. So the business itself has got to demonstrate that it is safe. It can be prosecuted safely, because there are, outside the Philippines, there are much bigger mines that operate in Chile, Peru, Australia, the US, even our neighbors, Malaysia, Indonesia. And they managed to do that. There have been accidents, no doubt, even in the oil industry and gas industry. But by and large, I think they've done reasonably well, diba? In terms of protecting their environment. So if these people can do it, and if we tell our people we cannot do it, Filipinos cannot do it, isn't that offensive to us?
Well,
If they can do it, they must have the proper safeguards, regulatory and the proper practices in order to do that. Telcos arguably can be pollutants too, because our cell sites consume a lot of power, right? And yeah.
Well, that's what the industry has been saying, that mining, that's the slogan, no? Mining again done right. So you're saying that is actually possible?
Yeah, aren't there concrete examples elsewhere on this planet that where they allow mining, and generally speaking, that it's been safe for them and a very important catalyst for their development.
Sir, still on mining, World Bank estimates that we're sitting on what, $1 trillion in worth of minerals, and yet mining still only contributes about what, 1.5% of GDP, 0.5% of employment. Is that enough? Do you think that environment, of course, is one real conversation to be had, but do you think that we are also missing out on the conversation about direct impact on employment?
Well, Robbie, to begin with, diba, where are the mining properties located? They're not located in urban areas. They're located in the rural areas, out there in the boondocks, right? And that's where most of our poor are located. So it certainly generates employment. It certainly generates capital investment. And mining is totally an export industry. So it generates a lot of dollars. So the value added to the economy is large, significant for this economy, because you generate the dollars, and most of your expenditures, apart from the capital expenditures, are local. So this is a business that if you abstract from the noise, is good for the economy. It generates certain employment out there in the rural areas. So it's something that, and you said we're one of the most mineralized countries in the world. They say we're number 5, number 2 in gold, number 3 in copper, or at least top 5 in those metals. And we have not, in the past few years, we have not encouraged new mines to be opened up. And when the metal prices have gone up these past 2 or 3 years, we have not been able to take advantage of the tailwind in metal prices. So our hope in the case of Silangan is that those metal prices continue to be high enough for us to be able to continue to justify the investment in Silangan.
Okay.
So, it's, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Pangilinan, we have some more questions, mining and non-mining, but if you don't mind, we just need to take a break. We'll pause right here, but please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to Chiefs on One News. We continue our conversation with MVP Group of Companies Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan. Sir, thank you for staying with us. Sir, cambio lang ako. May iba tayo ng konti ng topic, pero medyo hindi ko forte ito eh. I understand si Tab Baldwin resigned and Chot Reyes is coming in. Could you tell us about that? What exactly happened? Is there an inside story there that we'd want to know?
Well, over the holidays, let me go back a bit. No, over the holidays, Tab was in the States, in Florida, because his brother was sick, so he had to be with him for that reason. And when he got back, sometime in late January, we had I had been talking with him about, of course, the Ateneo. When does Ateneo start to train? To train up and working out the details, of course, with the Ateneo and Tab, and of course we started to talk about Gilas, because if you recall, the Basketball World Cup is supposed to be scheduled to be held here in August next year, so we only have about 18 months or so ahead. So I was quizzing him about what preparations are we making in respect of forming the team, and suggested to him that maybe we should work back an ideal pool of players that could be candidates for the 2023 team, then work back to, say, February or March. And so that's been the discussion with him. And then, so that happened over the course of about 2 or 3 weeks. And then he called me one weekend and said that he's been thinking, and this is my recollection, no? That he said that on reflection, it might be good for him to stay with the Ateneo and for SBP, Samahan Basketball, to nominate a coach for Gilas. He would help. He said he would help, and that's where the name of Chot emerged in that conversation. So. Right after that, I spoke with the folks at SBP, with Alpan Lilio and with Ricky Vargas, to say, hey, there's a new development here. We need to talk whether you guys are agreeable to having Chot as the returning coach, no? For that. So that's the genesis of this development. And I know nakukulayan ng mga comments. Pero that's the nub of this particular event, no?
Sir, yung isang comment, sabi nila, mukha daw Gilas is starting from all over again. Saka parang nasayang daw yung investment ng basketball federation sa national team program. Ano po yung comment niyo doon?
I think there's some truth to that, kasi Ami, 2 taon, wala silang walang nangyari, di ba? Kasi if we start the blame game, di ba kasama din siya doon? Kasi walang nangyari, COVID, that's principally the reason. Yes. Pero wala nag-iisip. Everybody's to blame, including myself, di ba? Wala kaming ginawa. Over that course, maybe not exactly 2 years, but certainly more than 1 year. Wala nangyari, di ba? So we have to start all over again. In the meantime, yung mga Japan has been taking players away from us. Correct naman yun, di ba? Kasi yung mga players naman, anong ginagawa dito? These guys are built to race, to run, to compete, di ba? And they've been lying fallow for more than a year. So I can sympathize why I would want to play elsewhere and earn money in the interim, no?
But anyway, magre-resume yung PBA, no? February 11, and yung TNT Tropang Giga is the lone team with a shot at a double championship or season sweep. Do you think of the team's chances?
Good siguro.
But MVP, let me get it back to Gilas. 2 things of concern for people, and we've touched on that a bit. One is all of the national pool, many of the national pool outside playing in other teams, other countries, and then the timing of this, the timing of the coaching change. We're just a few weeks away from a crucial stretch and a crucial what is the immediate what does the coaching change in particular mean for the short term and the immediate term?
You know, Robbie, we have that problem regardless who the coach will be. I know there's a February window that we have to deal with. But yun na nga even in my discussion with Tam sometime in late January, there was that issue outstanding of sino ang players ang available. Because the number of the Gilas of the past that under him signified their intention that they would, most of them have been drafted no, in the PBA. And gusto na nila maglaro sa PBA kasi ang tagal nila hindi naglalaro. No? So that issue is a constant regardless who the coach is. We would have that issue if Tab remained, di ba? Kasi you've lost people to Japan, we will lose players to the PBA. So now you have to scramble, no? And part of the problem is getting players to train up for that. Now, the advantage of having Chot, if I may say that, is that he probably will use the core players of TNT to serve on the Gilas, to reinforce the Gilas team that will compete in the February window, which is that's about what 3 weeks away.
3 weeks away, yes.
So we will have to deploy easily accessible PBA players, maybe from the group, or hopefully the San Miguel group would help, and have a combination of the best of what Tab had in the past and what the PBA players could lend to us.
As the economy opens up, you have a very, very unique and very powerful perspective, given that you have a pulse on people's mobility, you have a pulse on people's communications, all of these indicators of activity or inactivity. What is the sense you're getting in terms of the country starting to rev up again?
Robbie, I'm actually surprised at how resilient the economy is and our people are, and the business sector is, and surprised with the GDP growth numbers that we saw fourth quarter in the full year, and the government taking a more relaxed view about the virus, which is obviously welcomed by everybody, and giving the economy a chance to breathe again. No? So a bit more optimistic than I was at the end of last year. No, so and I hope it does continue.
Where did you think you underestimated anything?
Well, because yung Omicron set in last December, and then the restrictions were again imposed, and then of course inflation, the prospect of higher interest rates in the U.S. and elsewhere. Then got the geopolitical issues in Europe, in Asia, between China and the U.S., and then Ukraine, Russia, and of course the U.S., which have pushed fuel prices, oil, gas, coal, and metal prices, everything going up, right? So oh my God, and the Philippines importing fish, importing sugar, importing the staples, or what used to be staples for us. And that to me is, I think, regrettable, very regrettable that we're now importing. And then if we shut down our mining industry, then we have to import everything that we should be producing by ourselves and giving the profit, paying somebody else's profit to do it for us. That is really, for me, that's a
but let me clarify lang. Sorry, I really appreciate those insights, but I don't know if you misheard me, but the question is, where did you underestimate? I'm getting a lot of sense of why you underestimated a lot of the performance, a lot of the reasons to be conservative. I guess, let me rephrase, my question is, what do you think is the cause of the surprise that the economy is actually more resilient than you expected?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer.
Okay.
I can hazard a politically incorrect answer, but that is exposed to precisely the word hazard.
Sige, politics pa rin, sir, pero konting cambio. How about telcos? The campaign period will start on February 8. Yung PLDT and Smart, are there any preparations related to the campaign and the elections?
Nothing in particular, Ami. No, we continue our network build out as budgeted to ensure that everybody gets connected and all that. And then, of course, your coverage of the elections. We're preparing for that to ensure that you guys have the extensive and right connectivities when the votes start to get counted. So we're not preparing for anything that's special. What we're seeing is the pressure on our wireless business. The top-ups have softened a bit, and we're assuming that that is a function of the economic difficulties, because Smart and TNT are 95-96% prepaid business, and our brand is mostly the middle to low income customers. No? So they're probably the hardest hit in the last year or two. No? And so, but the home broadband is doing very well, and the enterprise part of the business is also doing very well, and in fact, contrarian results to the slowing economic growth of the country.
Well, the Public Service Act looks set for signing. How will it impact PLDT?
Not much, I mean, because we already have foreign investors here in the form of NTT Docomo and NTT Communications, and I think the bulk of our common shares are held actually by foreigners already.
How well is PLDT open to selling more shares to investors?
You know, it is. We had record high EBITDA, so the cash flows of PLDT are actually very, very strong. So I think we'd be loath to issue new equity given the strong cash flows and, you know, the anticipated stronger cash flows in 2022. I don't think it makes. I think we'll be crucified if we were to issue new shares in the wake of very strong cash flows. You know how shareholders are; they're very jealous about the danger of getting diluted.
How about the power sector? Ano po ang assessment nyo the past 5.5 years under this administration?
We just need to build more power plants, right? You know, it dates all the way back, Ami, to 2009 when we invested in Meralco, and when you know, it was an education for me. And one of the things that I learned is, and I wanted to learn about, was this spot market, the Western market. And I said, how does this thing operate, and so forth and so on. And you know, a market like that, spot market like that, would operate well if you have significant margin to possible demand. And even then, the margin that the effective capacity of the power plants then as now, compared to the demand, and demand has risen in the course of those, 12 years or so, 12, 13 years has grown, and we have not added significant capacity to raise the margin and create a truly free market in this spot market. I think we've seen a number of these yellow alerts the past few months, and we just don't have enough. No. And you know, there are many issues related to that. There's no policy on fuel. What power plants do we build? Is it coal? Is it gas? Is it this or is it that? Ngayon, ang problema now is the sourcing of the fuel. Kasi with gas prices are volatile, and gas supplies are volatile as well. As we understand it, mahirap kumuha ng long-term gas supply, di ba? And at what price? Ganun din sa coal. Indonesia has banned coal for a while. So we were, very, very concerned. Where do we get the coal? And, where do we turn? So we need, the group itself has got to understand where we're going in terms of course, the pressure on renewables. Where do we go? Because renewables also, people don't understand it. It's expensive. It's expensive, and people don't want to pay the price. What we want, what everybody, including you guys in media, saying we want renewables and we want it cheap. No such thing exists on this planet. Not yet, anyway.
Okay. Well, maraming salamat, sir, for joining us tonight. MVP Group of Companies Chairman Manny V. Pangilinan. Sir, thank you po.
Thank you.
Ingat po parati.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat
Thank you.
po.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not sure you were kinder to me than to the presidential.
Kami po ni Tahimik ngayon, si Ami yung tanong ng tanong sa inyo.
News lang yan, news.
Nasa harap niya po yung ibang mga editors niya na bato ng bato sa kanya ng questions. Lahat ng department, sports, business.
Pati showbiz.
Alagay ko may earpiece si Ami. May bumubulong sa kanya.
Wala pa mga tao rito.
Oh, sir. Maaga pa sa dyaryo, maaga pa. Ingat, sir.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
So just stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back. The Chiefs here on One News. Now joining us is political science professor Julio Tehanqui of De La Salle University. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Robbie, Ed, and Ami.
Sir, napanood niyo ba yung KBP Presidential Forum?
Of course, of course.
Okay.
Napanood natin.
Bias yung mga kasama ko dito eh. So, ano bang...
Bias at bayaran.
So kayo, objective perspective, what are your takeaways?
Okay, yes. So at this time in which traditional ground campaigning is highly restricted, because of the pandemic, these presidential fora and interviews are getting to be a primary source of information about the presidential candidate's vision for the country. Now, all the presidential aspirants who were present and not absent, played on their strengths and reinforced their narrative. So although I think the KBP forum should also be titled How to Make and Present a PowerPoint Presentation and Avoid Internet Issues. Parang online class lang ang peg.
Okay, but you're
Pero sir, were you getting the answers that you're looking for?
Yeah. It's it's actually more of the same, the same narratives, the same policy positions that they have been circulating since last year, And what is refreshing with this KBP debate is this is the first major appearance of a real alternative and an alternative narrative, and that is the narrative of Calio D. So unlike the rest, who's been mounting the same, some would say, neoliberal platitudes, all market-based, all the same old reformist good governance solutions, we have somebody who's really offering a radical solution.
May unusual wealth tax of 20% for the top 500.
Yes,
to raise
correct,
1 trillion.
So he's the very first socialist candidate to run for the presidency of this country since 1935. And yung wealth tax proposal niya, hindi yan bago. It's the same proposal that Bernie Sanders in the United States has been advocating for the longest time.
Yes, sir. Actually, sir, pati yung Makabayan Bloc, they filed a similar proposal, an actual bill in the House last year, imposing 1% tax for the first 1 billion, 2% tax for the second for the 2 billion, and so on down the line.
Yeah. So of course. So this is the first time that this reform policy. No, it's not even a reform policy. It's a radical solution to the problem of wealth inequality, is being proposed. Whether you are for it or against it, or whether you are ideologically, it is ideologically acceptable to majority of our countrymen, it depends. But the very fact na we are now seeing a policy like this being articulated on the national scene is a good thing, actually.
But Professor, I want to talk about the forum itself. And
Yes.
for that matter, traditional mainstream media itself.
Yes.
What is at stake here for the traditional media when the front runner keeps not showing up for traditional media platforms, but keeps his presence very much felt in the public conversation and in social media?
Yeah, Robbie, of late, ang palaging natititik kong kanta sa utak ko, yung Nowhere Man ng Beatles, So, what has become apparent, and obvious is the continuing absence of the leading candidate, At this point of the game naman kasi, with 53% up in the surveys, Bongbong Marcos has become an adherent to the traditional political saying, less talk, less mistake. No talk, no mistake.
Yes, but is it just that? I think we get that there is that political wisdom. Lamang ka bakit ka magpapatama, di ba? So we get that. Pero ang tanong ko is, at the end of this process, if he is proven right, it doesn't just prove that strategy wise, does it also prove na wala, parang pwede mo na talagang hindi pansinin ng traditional media, talagang mag-social media ka na lang?
Kasi Robbie, there's also a caveat. Kasi this is not the first time that a front-runner candidate deliberately skipped these activities ng presidential fora and debates. Apparently, he's borrowing from the playbook of Joseph Estrada in 98, who attended, if I remember, only 2 major debates, but still won by a landslide. But we must also remember, in 2004, FPJ skipped almost all the debates. And this allowed GMA to catch up with him and narrow down his lead. So it's not a sure win strategy. It really depends on the situation. Now, these interviews nowadays, there's a big difference between the 90s and the early 2000s and the current lay of the land in terms of media. These interviews can be reinforced, or these interviews can reinforce or discredit a candidate's narratives. A lot of things get repeated 24/7 in social media. In the past, traditional media has gatekeepers, yung owners and editors like AMI. Yung mga editors dati ang may kapangyarihan mag-control ng flow ng information. But nowadays, social media has circuited political communication. Now, the Marcos camp wants to control their narrative by relying strictly on social media, where BBM can play cute with the bloggers, and influencers, and spin myths about the golden era and the Taliano gold. Pero at the end of the day, again, this can also backfire, because those who live by social media can perish by social media, because these same interviews can now be seen all over the world 24/7. And if you're not present in this serious conversation, then hanggang doon ka na lang sa pakyut, di ba?
And there's the question of credibility, Kasi kung yung social media, you're talking about regulation in mainstream media. Kung walang regulation, wala ding regulation ng content, di ba? At a certain point, hindi ba, masasaturate, do you think at a certain point, masasaturate din ang fake news ang mga tao? Paulit-ulit na, ay, mali pala yan. Ano ba yung pinakikinggan yung yan?
Yes.
Hindi
Oo,
ba?
kasi parang online selling lang yan. Kung ikaw ay nagtitinda sa online at puro scam ang binebenta mo, scammer ka, hindi ka na rin tatangkilikin ng mga tao. Di ba?
In fact, that's what the social media platforms, Google, Facebook, kaya sila nagpa-partner with mainstream media actually dahil nga sila mismo nararamdaman nila na nawawala yung credibility nila and even in advertising, You really need truth in advertising kasi if you get enough complaints, di ba? na pambihira naman yan, tinitindan nyo, ano ba yan? That's trash. There's no
Right.
truth in advertising, hindi ba? You think that can also happen sa ganitong klaseng marketing ng isang
Yes.
politician?
Yes, in political marketing terms, no, candidates should always tell their stories. Diba? They must tell compelling stories, but they must also tell real stories, no? Yung katotohanan din naman, no? Yung hindi masyadong embellished, no? And if you avoid, opportunities like this to tell your stories truthfully, your narratives truthfully, then it's like you're doing the people a great disservice.
Pero Prof, isn't that premise based on the idea that the public knows truth from falsity, and that even if they hear the truth, they're willing to hear it, and they're willing to listen.
Yeah. In social science kasi, Ed, in political science, no, there is that myth of the rational voters, no? Because there's so much information.
Myth of the rational
Diba?
voter.
Diba? There's so much information that the voters can only take so much, no? So they filter it out, no? So at the end of the day, what they go for is the very information that they think will benefit their interests, no?
Mhm.
So in reality, what we see as irrational might really be rational. No? There's a reason why they're attracted to these candidates, even if some of these candidates are not truthful. No? So we must dig deeper on the reasons why.
Well, sa nakita nyo kanina, you said you watched, and magkakaroon ng part 2 daw yung KBP na yan eh.
Yes.
What else do you want to see, and what did you not hear kanina?
Well, aside from the fact that as much as possible, the other candidates should be there, not only the front-running candidate, but why not consider everyone? No? Just like in the past, no, we've had 11 candidates on stage. No, in the old days, no, yung mga 7 candidates on stage, no, presenting their platforms and their visions. No. Yeah, I would like to hear what their plans are really on how do we exit, no, this pandemic. It's very crucial because by the time if they win and by the time they take office, I don't think we have recovered fully from the pandemic. So what are the plans, the specific plans? Second, what do they intend to do with every administration that comes in always handles the economic issues, no? But they always forget to handle the issue that matters, no? And that this issue is political reform and then social reform, no? If we don't address the way we do politics and the inequality that feeds on the way we do politics, we'll just get the same, no? Whether it's BPM who wins, whether it's Lenny who wins, or any of the other candidates, pag hindi natin inayos yung root cause ng mga problema natin, paulit-ulit lang tayong maghahalal based on personalities.
Okay, Prof, tanungin kita as a media expert, dahil I also want to manage people's expectations. Yung sinasabi nyo kanina na lahat ng mga kandidato, actually, one thing that will happen after February 8 is that every forum obligado ang anybody who to invite all the presidential candidates. You already saw how unwieldy it was to try to manage 5, much less 6 kung nakompleto kanina. Now you're gonna see 10. Now the disadvantage obviously is that there's no time. People want everybody and people want depth, but you can't actually give people either or both, di ba?
The solution there is to to hold it as many times as possible, no? And we have seen this in the primaries in the United States, no? They had 12 candidates on stage, and they went on real full-on debate, no? So it's manageable, no? It's kailangan maging creative na lang how you will do it, no? Let's leave it to the communicators, no? Sa inyo, no? Mga broadcasters, no? But it's doable, no? If not, just give the opportunity also to the others to speak, no? Bert Gonzalez has been getting good reviews on his appearances. No, we get to hear in other independent candidates. No? Why? Because the more ideas you throw in, the more all of these so-called major competitors will be forced to adjust their narratives, no? Their storyline.
Okay.
Professor, you mentioned political reforms. May
Yes.
pag-asa ba itong bansa natin genuine political reform, considering na entrenched na yung sistema eh. Di ba?
Yeah.
Too many people are profiting from the status quo already.
Yeah, but you know, hope springs eternal. No, sometimes you know there are a lot of monumental events in our recent histories that nobody expected, and yet it happened. No, so there will always be what is known in the literature as the black swan events. No? So may mga black swan events na mangyayari, and who knows? No, it might not be in this electoral cycle, but because of the outcome of this electoral cycle, we as a nation will now be forced to introspect, no, to reflect on why we are where we are as a nation, and that might spark especially. Remember, the largest voting bloc in this year's election would be the youth. No, of course, the youth vote is not a monolithic vote, and it has always been the holy grail of all electoral blocs. No? The youth vote has never delivered for a national candidate. The last time it almost did was with Miriam in 92 and in Raul Roco in 98. Pero wala. No? So who knows? The youth might vote differently in this year's election in the same manner that the OFW delivered for President Rodrigo Duterte in 2016.
Okay.
Okay. Maraming salamat po, Political Science Professor Julio Tehanqui of De La Salle
Thank you.
University.
Thank you,
sir.
Professor.
Ingat po.
Ingat.
And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.